All right, guys, thank you very much for joining me tonight. It's a pleasure to be with you on this Friday's night. And well, as I told you, our objective for tonight's class is to practice the listening section and to apply everything we've been learning together, okay? So we're going to practice using, of course, lectures and conversations, just as it is going to be as well on your exam, okay? So please prepare your headphones, okay? Have them very much ready. And also prepare your sheet of paper and your pencil to take notes, okay? We're gonna listen to, as I said, lectures and conversation. We're gonna start with a lecture, all right? In this case, I think it's good to start with a lecture, and then we're going to go with a conversation as well. So the order, as I told you, doesn't actually matter, right? So let's go with a lecture. We're gonna listen to this, and as we did yesterday, one by one, all of you are going to respond to these questions. And that's how we're going to be practicing, okay? So let's listen to part of a lecture in a US history class. Very interesting topic for those of you who love America. So let's go.
Listen to part of a lecture in a U.S. history class.
To fully understand the Cold War, to get why exactly relations between the U.S. and the Soviet Union were, well, so strained, we should take a step back first and look at earlier world events. We'll talk about World War II, of course, but let's start even before that, in the 1920s, to get a more complete picture. I'm sure you've all heard of the Roaring Twenties. It was a decade that saw tremendous political, economic, and social change in America. Those changes, they opened up more opportunities for industrial and economic growth. Restrictions that had been in place during World War I weren't applicable to growing businesses anymore in the 1920s. Now, new policies that encouraged big business were adopted. For example, tariffs. Tariffs were raised to the highest level on foreign goods to keep out competition. That means that products manufactured in America were more easily available to consumers, and so American industry flourished. The sense of security, the confidence, it was almost tangible. But that didn't last, of course. The country couldn't sustain that kind of economic growth, and, in a way, it eventually brought about the stock market crash of 1929 and the Great Depression of the 1930s. The impact of the Great Depression not only weakened America's economy, but also other countries too. This is because trade with America dipped. Loans that had been given to countries like Germany after the First World War failed to bring economic stability. Ultimately, all that economic unrest gave power to extreme political movements like communism, fascism, and National Socialism, Nazism. Now, when war broke out in Europe in the late 30s, after Germany violated the World War I peace treaty, President Roosevelt announced that America would remain neutral. It was controversial, but the U.S. wasn't exactly looking to join any conflicts we could avoid at that point. Not after World War I. A surprising number of people today don't realize this, but America stayed out of the war in Europe for a full 2 years. We provided money and weaponry to some extent, but that's it. No manpower. And it was in those same 2 years that, well, Germany and its European allies took control of almost the entirety of Europe. But then things changed. It was Pearl Harbor, of course, the bombing on December 7th, 1941, that motivated America to join the war. The Pacific Fleet took a large hit in the surprise bombing, and on December 8th, America declared war on Japan. It was only 3 days later that Japan's allies, Germany and Italy, declared war against America. Now, I mention all this to set some context for the relationship between the Soviet Union and the United States at the time America joined the war. We were allies, but only strategically so. We shared an enemy. So Roosevelt joined the British and Soviet leaders, Winston Churchill and Joseph Stalin, in developing a military strategy. Those three leaders agreed that Germany's defeat should come before Japan's. Together, they began a military operation in North Africa in the summer of 1942. America not only contributed supplies to drive German and Italian soldiers out of North Africa and France, but also assisted the Soviets with soldiers for the first time in order to push German troops back into Europe. I won't linger on the details of the war, but on May 7th, 1945, Germany surrendered. Japan also formally surrendered on September 2nd, 1945, but at a great civilian cost, of course, with Hiroshima and Nagasaki both devastated by atomic bombs. I know some of you will have opinions on those bombings, so we'll talk about the ethical questions raised in another class later this month. In any case, the consequences of World War II were catastrophic, obviously. There were millions of displaced persons, an alarming death toll, and widespread destruction. But even if the fighting had stopped, the tension hadn't fully subsided. I mean, post-war disagreements between America and the Soviet Union, these disagreements paved the way for distrust and paranoia. With their common enemy defeated, the two countries no longer had to remain allies. Both rose from the aftermath of war as the dominant global powers, and at the same time the military value of the atomic bomb was now indisputable. And that brings us to the Cold War.
Great. Well, very interesting lecture for those of you who are very much passionate about history as me. But anyways, let's go and respond to these questions. So as we did yesterday, 1-to-1, you're going to respond, okay, to these questions. And in this case, our dear Fla is going to help me. Okay, Fla, this is going to be for you. The first question. Okay, and well, here you have your 4 or 5 seconds to respond. You can use them.
I think is the first one.
Okay, the first one. Very good, thank you. Let's continue then with the next question. This is going to be for Lenny. Okay, dear Lenny, this is yours. You can respond.
I think it's the third one.
The third one. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Lenny. There you are. Let's go with the next question. This is for you, dear Maya.
It's in the Pacific.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go with the next question. All right, here we are. This is for you, dear Lucia.
Sí.
Okay, thank you very much, Lucia. And now question number 5 is for Karen. Okay, dear Karen, it's going to be yours.
Number 8.
Okay, thank you very much. And last question is going to be once again for Fla. Okay, dear Fla. But in this case, we have to listen to part of the lecture. So please let us start listening before you respond.
Listen again to part of the lecture. Then answer the question.
America not only contributed supplies to drive German and Italian soldiers out of North Africa and France, but also assisted the Soviets with soldiers for the first time in order to push German troops back into Europe. I won't linger on the details of the war, but on May 7th, 1945, Germany surrendered.
Why does the professor say this?
I won't linger on the details of the war.
Okay. Now you can respond to the Fla. This is going to be for you.
I think it's the second one.
All right, thank you. Very good. Well, guys, we have finalized them responding the first lecture, and let's go to evaluate your responses, okay? Here we are. Let's go. Okay, let's check them out. Okay, coming back. Great, here we are. So what is the main topic of the lecture? And in this case, the correct answer was the events leading to hostility between two global superpowers, okay? Now, this is the correct answer because when you remember the lecture's beginning, then you think, well, the professor said, right, we're going to talk about the Cold War, but I do not want to talk about the Cold War starting with the 90s, right, when this conflict, of course, was going through. But I want to talk about the antecedents. I want to talk about the preceding events that caused this conflict between the Soviets and also, of course, America. So this is the main topic of the entire lecture, the events, right, leading to hostility between two global powers, the Soviets and also, of course, America, right? So that's the reason why he started with the crisis in the 20s. Then he talked about the Second War, and all that brought to the table the Cold War, okay? It's not the impact of the Roaring '20s on the US and World War II, because it is just part of it, right? But this doesn't also comprehend the Cold War, that, as I say, was, let's say, this conflict between the Soviets and America. That is certainly part of the main idea of this lecture, okay? Anyways, don't worry, we're practicing that idea. Very good. Let's go to the next question. What is the professor's attitude towards the Roaring '20s? It was a time of sustainable, or it was a time of unsustainable economic prosperity. And yeah, this is true because the professor himself admits this, right? He says, you know, in this time, some tariffs were adequate for companies and business to grow up and, of course, to flourish. Nonetheless, America was not able to tolerate this for a long time. And that's the reason why the Great Depression came in the 1930s and stuff like that, right? So that's the reason why, because of the word choice he uses, you can say, well, it was a time of unsustainable economic prosperity, because the same professor mentions, you know, this is something unsustainable because in the future years, the Great Depression came, and of course that affected not only America, but different countries around the world, right? So yeah, you could say that it was a time of unsustainable economic prosperity, what the professor believed about the Roaring '20s. And it was marked by social changes that triggered the Second World War. I think this is untrue, because it was not social changes, it was economical changes, right? So if you think about it, maybe the reason why this particular response seems to be incorrect just because that particular war, given that in the lecture, he never talked about social things actually, of course, occurring during this time, but more about economic consequences or economic changes undergone through that time. These tariffs, as I say, that were adequate to allow businesses to grow up, to flourish, etc. So yeah, I would say that that is part of the reason why this is not the correct answer. Okay, let's go. Question number 3. According to the professor, what was the most direct cause motivating America's decision to join World War II? And in this case, it was a correct answer, a conflict with Japan in the Pacific. This is what is better known as Pearl Harbor, this attack on this island on the Pacific. Very good. It was the correct answer. The professor said that America decided to remain neutral. Roosevelt decided to remain neutral during 2 years. And during those 2 years, basically the Nazis took control of all Europe. But when Japan attacked America in the Pacific on Pearl Harbor, well, America, of course, joined the war in a matter of hours, right? Well, who wouldn't like to be attacked? And of course, not to defend yourself, right? So yeah, America joined. Well, next question. How does the professor organize the information about World War II? Chronologically, beginning with the events from decades earlier. Yeah, exactly, because you talked about how or the professor talked about how the Roaring Twenties caused a lot of power in the in the Nazis, in communism, in socialist movements, and that's how they got empowered and, of course, strengthened to sustain the war they initiated in the late 30s, right? So yeah, the professor starts with decades earlier, explaining how this World War II came to exist, right? So yeah, very good response. This is what the professor said. What can be inferred about the impact of World War II on America? The war shaped America's position as a war power and influenced relations with the Soviet Union. You can infer this, you know why, dear students, because there's a particular part in the lecture when the professor says both countries, America and the Soviet Union, came out as superpowers after World War II ended. So because of this sentence, you can infer, okay, how does this affect America? Well, by becoming a superpower after, of course, the tremendous amount of money they reclaimed of all these countries that contributed to the destruction of Europe and all this, as I say, tariffs they imposed, etc. And how this, of course, shaped the interaction and the relationship they had with the Soviets, because they no longer had a common enemy. And as you know, the phrase is, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. But when your enemy ceases to exist, well, the enemy of your enemy becomes, well, probably your enemy, right? So that's the reason why they became enemies against the Soviet Union. Well, and the last question, we have to listen to this once again. Let's listen to this part.
Listen again to part of the lecture. Then, why does the
Germany surrendered.
professor say this?
I won't linger on the details of the war.
Yeah, and I think this is actually very much clear, right? He says, I won't linger on the details of this war because it was too long, right, to easily summarize it in a single class session. And that's the reason why he jumped all apart. He skipped all apart in events and wars and I don't know, takeovers of the war. And he summarized it saying, well, in 1945, Germany surrendered, Japan surrendered. Months later, the war ended, right? So he summarized it in a very, very much subtle but concise manner, saying, well, the war started here and then ended years after with the surrender of Germany and Japan consequently. Okay, well, that's it. That's the first lecture. And I think it was a very good exercise and practice. You did it very well. Of course, we are practicing, so don't worry about the wrong responses. That's the idea, to improve the criteria. And now let's go with another lecture. Okay, this is about psychology. So to those of you who enjoy this part, of course, it's going to be easier. Okay, so let's go and listen to a new lecture.
Listen to part of a lecture in a psychology class.
As you all know, psychological trauma has lasting and very damaging effects on a person. People who have survived abuse or neglect from a very young age, soldiers coming back from a war, and other kinds of people, too, are at risk for the disabling symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, for years and years. Some types of therapy can provide some relief and some symptom resolution. These therapies can be long-term or short-term. They can teach people many useful skills. They can focus on past, present, and future and be very helpful. However, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, or EMDR, has the promise to do something unique. It can help on a somatic level, which means that it helps the body feel different, and not just the mind, like other therapies. EMDR allows the body to feel safe again and to learn that a new life is possible. It is a set of standardized protocols that incorporates elements from many different treatment approaches, and it has helped millions of people of all ages find relief from many types of psychological stress. It involves learning new ways to process traumatic memories and a somewhat unconventional approach in which patients follow a beam of light back and forth with their eyes as they work with their therapists. The big goal of EDMR therapy is to understand completely the experiences that are causing problems and to include new ones that are needed for full health. To process these experiences does not mean just to describe them and talk about them. Instead, it means setting up a state of mind that will allow these experiences to be understood in a healthy way In other words, the big, strong emotional reaction will become much smaller over time. The person will feel better and not have as much difficulty doing day-to-day activities. The inappropriate emotions, beliefs, and body sensations will be removed. Negative emotions, feelings, and behaviors are generally caused by unresolved earlier experiences that are pushing you in the wrong directions. The goal of EMDR therapy is to leave the patient with the emotions, understanding, and perspectives that will lead to healthy and useful behaviors and interactions. No one knows exactly how any form of psychotherapy works in the brain. However, we do know that when a person is very upset, their brain cannot process information normally and clearly. The traumatic experience can become frozen in time and continue to repeat endlessly. Remembering a trauma may feel as bad as experiencing it again and again. The images, sounds, smells, and feelings often do not change but remain very present. Such memories have a lasting negative effect that interferes with the way a person sees the world and the way they relate to other people. EMDR seems to have a direct effect on the way that the brain processes information. Normal information processing is resumed, so following a successful EMDR session, a person no longer experiences the images, sounds, and feelings when the event is brought to mind. The patient will still remember what happened, but in a much less upsetting way. Researchers think that this has to do with the way the person's eyes move when he is thinking of a bad memory. In EMDR, the patient sits in a chair and is taught to think about a memory that is very painful. Then, with the guidance of the therapist, the patient thinks about this memory while following a light moving from side to side with his eyes. This causes his eyes to move from one side of his head to the other. The movement of the eyes stimulates the brain in a way that helps the person feel better. Although EMDR may produce results more quickly than previous forms of therapy, speed is not the issue. And it is important to remember that every client has different needs. For instance, one client may take weeks to feel safe enough with a therapist to be able to do the work that is required by the treatment. Another reason why EMDR may not be very fast in the eyes of many psychologists, why it sometimes has that reputation, is that some patients have layers of long-term trauma, so that when one issue is resolved, another one comes up. Sometimes the next issue may even be more important. Also, treatment is not complete until EMDR therapy has focused on the past memories that are contributing to the problem, the present situations that are disturbing the patient, and what skills the client may need for the future. All three elements need to be addressed: past, present, and future. The good news is that this treatment works, and people really do get better. A lot better.
Great, there you are. Well, fantastic. Let us go and respond to questions then. Let us start in this case with Maya. Okay, this is your Maya. This one's going to be for you. You can start responding now.
I think it's the fourth one, the value.
Okay. Thank you very much. There you are. Let's go with next question. This is for you, dear Karen. Here you go.
Sí.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go with you, dear Fla. This is going to be for you. Here you have it.
I think it's the second one.
Okay, thank you. There you are. Next question. Okay, we have to listen this one, and this is going to be for Lenny, okay? So, dear Lenny, let us listen to this question before you can respond it.
Listen again to part of the lecture, then answer the question.
The traumatic experience can become frozen in time and continue to repeat endlessly. Remembering a trauma may feel as bad as experiencing it again and again.
What does the professor mean when she says this?
The traumatic experience can become frozen in time and continue to repeat endlessly.
Okay, now you can respond.
I think it's the third one.
The third one. Okay, thank you. All right, let's go with the next question. We have, in this case, to listen once again. This is going to be for Lucia, okay, dear Lucia. So let's listen once again.
Why does the professor say this?
Although EMDR may produce results more quickly than previous forms of therapy, speed is not the issue. And it is important to remember that every client has different needs.
There you are. So now, dear Lucia, you can respond it.
B.
Okay, thank you very much. And now the last question is going to be for Maya. Okay, so dear Maya, you can respond this one.
It's answer 2 and 3.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Okay, now we can check this out. We have finalized, and let's of course offer some feedback on your responses. Okay, let's come back. All right, those are the 4 or 5 seconds, don't worry. Okay, great. Here we are. So what is the main topic of the lecture? The value and usefulness of NDR treatment. I think this is very clear, right? This was the referential topic during the entire lecture. The professor was talking about this treatment and its implications, its applications, its characteristics. It was certainly the main topic, okay? Next question. According to the professor, what does processing mean? Understanding and experience via a healthy state of mind. Well, this is a detailed question. How you respond to this type of question? By paying attention to every single detail, and this is exactly what the lecture said, right? So, very good. Let's go with the next question. What is the speaker's attitude towards AMDR? Excuse me, AMDR. She believes it is a unique form of therapy with a proven track record and promising future. She believes it is a unique form of therapy with a proven track record and promising future, right? So in this case, this is the personal opinion of the professor on EMDR for the very simple reason that, well, she said, right? We have different forms of therapy that merely concentrate on the mind, but also this one concentrates on the body. It uses this movement, right, in the eyes to provoke some sort of response of our body to enhance our good feelings about traumatic events in our lives. So she believes it is certainly unique and also, of course, promising, right? Because she says, well, there are a lot of things we have to talk about this, we have to discover, we have to use it, but it's a good technique, right? Right now, and it also has a good record because many professionals are using it right now with good results. It's not B, she thinks it will require time before EMDR's benefits can be fully understood by psychologists because she admits, right, that this therapy has already thrown out very impressive results by different professionals. So we cannot say that she believes it takes some time for EMDR to show positive outcomes, but she actually believes they have, or this technique has already demonstrated such capacity and display such effectiveness, right? So we cannot say this is the correct answer, but this one, because of the words she uses, how she describes this technique, how she compares this technique to other techniques that were merely mental, but not bodily as well, right? So yeah, next question, 4. Let us listen once again.
Traumatic experience can be traumatic. The traumatic experience.
Says this. Professor mean when she says this.
The traumatic experience can become frozen in time and continue to repeat endlessly.
In this case, it was traumatic experiences can haunt the memory and never leave a person's mind. You know what? This is not the correct answer. Traumatic experiences sometimes occur in repetitious patterns in people's life. It's because in this case, it is talking about the experiences. But notice that in this audio we listen, it was talking about the memories of the experiences, your memoirs on the experience, right? So it is not that experiences are repeated. Or for example, if you suffer abuses in the past, you suffer those abuses once again and once again. In this case, it's talking about how you remember those abuses and how that makes you feel way, I don't know, endangered and of course, and painful and stuff, right? So yeah, in this case, it's not the correct answer because it confuses that particular thing, right? That it is not talking about the experiences as such, but the memoirs on these experiences, right? So yeah, question number 5. Why does the professor say this? Let's listen.
Why does the professor say this?
Although EMDR may produce results more quickly than previous forms of therapy, speed is not the issue. And it is important to remember that every client has different needs.
Okay. Remember, in this case, the important thing is what she says at the end. Speed is never the issue. And it's important to remember that every single client requires a different treatment because they have different necessities. So by that sentence, you can understand, well, she's cautioning, right? Her students against hurrying throughout treatment to obtain fast results because it's never about speed. It's about the necessities of the client, right? So notice how she's cautioning, warning her students about that, right? So it's not to clarify why EMDR is a time limit treatment approach because she never said that this is time limited. That is to say, you can perform this treatment during a very much limited and bounded time. But she said, well, you can apply this, and nonetheless, it's not very much fast every single time. But the speed is not the point. Actually, you have to worry about the necessity of your clients, right? So it's not about saying, EMDR. Excuse me, I don't know why it's so difficult to pronounce it. It's like EMDR. EMDR is not time limited because she's not saying, you can merely perform this, let's say, by 2 months, or you can merely perform this when the person is in the spectrum of 18 years old until 25 years old. But she's saying, you shouldn't worry that this technique or treatment takes a long time sometimes because the speed in which you obtain the results is not always the important thing. It's about the necessities, fulfilling and serving the necessities of your client, right? So it's cautioning about that, about the worry and the concern about velocity. Well, the next question, and the last one actually, and this one was very good responded. We had to respond, right? Which of the sentences describe EMDR? Once again, having troubles to pronounce this. Maybe slow in cases of multiple levels of trauma. Fantastic. Involves moving the eyes back and forth while looking at being of light. Well, exactly what the professor said, right? Fantastic. So I think that we have practiced them enough with lectures. It's time for us to go to listen conversations because remember, in the listening section, you merely get, or you do not merely get lectures, but also conversations. So let's go and listen to some conversations now to see if we can, of course, apply our learning, on this type of material too. Okay. So here you have the first conversation. Pay attention, and then we're going to respond following the same mechanism. Let's go.
Now listen to a conversation between a student and a professor.
Hi, Professor Carlson. Thanks for letting me meet with you on such short notice.
Hey, my door is always open. During my office hours, at least.
Yeah, so I'm confused about how to do research for my essay.
Right. In your email, you said you weren't sure how to find valid sources of information online.
Yeah, I mean, I do remember what you said in class about not just using random stuff we find on the internet, and I get that, I do. But what kind of online sources can we use?
Well, that really depends on the subject you're looking into. What's your essay about again?
I'm writing about the effects of river pollution, how it impacts wildlife and people.
Okay, yeah. So if you want to find really reliable info on that kind of pollution, you'll want to look at the reliability of the author. And if...
Yeah, but what if the article doesn't give the name of the author? I found a really good study on a government website. It looked at a major river in California, measured the pollution, and showed some damage to the local animals, with photos and statistics. But there's no listed author, and...
Well, that's...
But I can still trust government research, right? Even with no author?
Well, that's what I was trying to say. You can check to see if a source is sponsored by a trustworthy organization. Governments have a lot of interest in regulating pollution and figuring out its effects. So, yeah, that website is probably a valid source for your paper.
So, to find a valid source, I just need to check the author and the website. Company? The sponsor?
Yes, I mean not just those two things. To see if something you read online is valid, you really have to look at the whole picture. The author, the website sponsor. Also, you need to look at the year. For example, a report on river pollution from a decade ago could be outdated. The situation could have gotten better or worse since then. And then bias. You need to look for bias.
Bias?
Yes, bias. Does the author or publisher have a reason to lie or distort the facts? Suppose, for example, say you find a write-up on river pollution by a very well-educated scientist. But the scientist researcher's wife is CEO of a company that actively pollutes rivers. In a situation like that, the author could be biased. You know, motivated to understate the amount of damage industrial pollution does.
I think I get the idea, but man, this is confusing. So much stuff to think about when I look at a source.
Well, it sounds like you have found one pretty good source so far. Those government stats. But if you still feel a little shaky, I'll tell you what. Email me links to the next couple of sources you find, and I'll give you some feedback. Tell you if you're still on the right track.
You'd do that? Thanks! I'll take you up on that.
Very, very great. Well, hope you found this actually easier, right? Because, well, it's a conversation. It's not that much difficult to recognize. Well, here we are. Let us start in with this process, and let's go with Lenny, okay? Dear Lenny, the first one goes for you.
I think it's the first one.
Okay, thank you very much, Lenny. Let's go to the next question, and in this case, this is going to go for Maya, okay? There you have.
It's answer 4.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go to the next question. Karen, this is going to go for you.
I think is CD. A.
Which one, excuse me? The last one?
A.
Oh, A. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Let's go. Let's continue the timer. So this one goes for Fla, dear Fla.
I think it's the third one.
The third one. Thank you. All right. Question number 5 now. But in this case, we have to listen first. This is going to go for Lucia anyways, okay? So dear Lucia, let's listen.
Listen again to part of the conversation, then answer the question.
Hi, Professor Carlson. Thanks for letting me meet with you on such short notice.
Hey, my door is always open. During my office hours, at least.
Why does the professor say this?
Hey, my door is always open. During my office hours, at least.
Okay, now you can go, dear Lucia.
Is the C teacher.
Okay, thank you very much, Lucia. There you are. Okay, fantastic. And the last question will go for Lenny once again. Okay. Oh no, in this case we just had 5 questions apparently in this one. But yeah, but as I said, like in the normal and actual. Oh, but it is a conversation. Of course, it's just 5, right? I was thinking that this was a lecture, but yeah, remember by lecture you get 6 questions, but in conversations you get 5. So it's very good. Okay, let's review them and see how you performed. Okay, we have the 45 seconds. Let's see. So why does a student visit the professor? To get advice on research methods for his essay. I think this is very clear, right? He enters the room. He says, well, I need to get some advice because I have forgotten some things on my, well, I have, let's say, forgotten some things we have discussed in class. Could you help me, right? And the professor says, yeah, of course. Next question. What does the professor say about sources with no listed author? And here the correct answer was, if the author is unknown, students should look for other signs of the source's reliability. Well, let us remember that the professor discussed many sources, right? Characteristics in order to determine its reliability. That is to say, if they are actually very much secure, if they are safe, if they are things that you can trust on. And she said, well, you have the author, you have the date, you have the people who are financing that study, you have to look for biases, different characteristics and traits. And well, when she talked about the author, he said, or she said in this case, if you don't find out the author, you should look for other signs. You should look for the date or for the people who are sponsoring that particular source or who said it before, who talked about that particular resource or source before you, right? So she considers that it is not, let's say, fatal if you just find that the author is unknown. You should actually go and look for more traits and characteristics to determine if this is actually valid or not, right? So that is the correct answer. And the D answer is not correct because sources where the author is not named are often found on websites devoted to the government's research. Well, that's not, this was never brought into the table, right? Like if they were just part of government research, well, the professor never said this anyways. Okay, but don't worry, it's, as I say, it's just a little bit confusing sometimes. Very good response anyways. Okay, according to the professor, what aspects of a source should the student look at? And as I told you, sometimes these detailed questions give you more than one answer to choose. In this case, 3 answers. This is what I had told you beforehand. So notice what I told you was true. So in this case, it was 2, 3, and 4. Possible dishonesty or distortion of facts on the part of the author, which company or organization is sponsoring the website, and the publication date of the source. So yeah, you have the 3 responses here. the three of them, the characteristics, as I told you, that the professor advised the students should look for in order to determine the source's reliability and accuracy. Okay. Question number 4. We have this one. What will the student probably do after receiving advice from the professor? Do more research and send the professor a follow-up email. And you can know this is the correct answer because at the end of the conversation, the professor says, hey, I see that you are having some trouble. Send me a message, send me an email, and I can tell you if you are on track, if you are doing things well, if you are actually perceiving and analyzing things correctly. And the student says, yeah, you do that for me, great, of course I'll do it. So he'll follow up or he'll interact with the professor through an email message, right? Very good. And final question, let us listen to this.
Listen again to part of the conversation.
Least.
Why does the professor say this?
Hey, my door is always open. During my office hours, at least.
Yeah, and you got it correctly here. She's assuring the student that he is welcome to visit whenever she is available. And of course, you know this because she says, right, well, at least in my office time, right? And this means that if you want to look for me at 12 a.m., don't do it because I'm not in my office. But if I am here in my office, during my office time, I am working, of course, come here. I'm very much pleasured and pleased to see you, right? So yeah, very good. Well, let's go with another conversation before we finalize this class tonight. So let's listen to a new conversation.
Listen to a conversation between a professor and a student.
Oh, Jason, long time no see. How have you been?
I guess it has been a while. Amazing how time flies. I've been well. Graduation's coming up pretty quickly, but I've been enjoying my senior year.
And how's your older sister? Amy?
Amy? She's good. She just got an internship at the Library of Congress. But I don't see her much nowadays. Anyway, I'm kind of coming to you for some specific advice if you have a moment.
Well, my schedule's wide open. What's on your mind?
Okay, so I'm helping out Professor Williams in his Intro to English History class, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I heard that.
He's letting me take over the class one day to teach it. And that's exciting, but I've never designed a lesson before, and I'm kind of embarrassed to go talk to Professor Williams about what I'm planning. He can be a little intimidating.
Oh, don't sweat it. I remember how nerve-wracking it can be when you first get up to teach. So what's the lesson?
Oh, the lesson's going to be on King Henry VIII. Just like an introduction, an overview of his life and influence,
Got it.
So far, I outlined all the ways he's impacted England, both in the Renaissance and today. It seems boring. Here, you can take a look at my lesson plan if you want.
That would help. Well, I do think you've accounted for all the major elements of his legacy, but even glancing at the plan, I don't see any real focus. It looks more like a list.
A list? Yeah, I guess so.
How can I put this? All right, let me just ask you this. What do you think the most important part of Henry VIII's legacy is? I mean, what do you think of his overall stature as a ruler?
What do you mean?
I mean, well, consider his place in history outside of England for a moment. Would you agree that, along with the current Queen Elizabeth II and his own daughter, Elizabeth I, that he's one of the most famous English rulers ever?
Sure. We don't learn nearly as much about kings like William III or Stephen of Blois or Richard II, even in really in-depth history courses.
Exactly. Why do you think that is?
A number of reasons. He was married 6 times. He had 2 of his wives beheaded. He was famously fat by the end of his life. And he went from being a staunch Catholic to, defying the Pope and founding his own church. Henry VIII was kind of larger than life.
Exactly. You can paint a really engaging picture with that character. You can deliver the dry facts during the story, but you might want to keep the class's attention with a bit of a flourish, with focus on those over-the-top details. Does that make sense?
I think so, yeah. That's a great point. Maybe I should try out the lecture with somebody willing before I have to actually give it, like rehearse so I can tell the story better.
I think that's a great idea.
There you are. Well, let's go and respond to some conversations questions. And let us start this opportunity with Maya, okay? So please, dear Maya, you can start responding this first question.
It's answer A.
All right, thank you very much, Maya. There we are. Next question goes for Lenny. Dear Lenny, this one goes for you.
I think the third one.
The third one, thank you. Now let's go with Karen. Dear Karen, this goes for you.
B.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go with Fla. Dear Fla, this is going to go for you.
I think it's the first one.
The first one, okay, thank you very much. And we finalize with Lucia, but we have to listen first.
Listen again to part of the conversation, then answer the question.
I'm kind of embarrassed to go talk to Professor Williams about what I'm planning. He can be a little intimidating.
Oh, don't sweat it. I remember how nerve-wracking it can be when you first get up to teach.
What does the professor mean when she says this?
Oh, don't sweat it.
Okay, dear Lucia, now you can respond. The question.
D.
Okay, B, thank you very much.
No. D. D.
Oh, D, I'm so sorry. Okay, thank you very much. There you are. Okay, fantastic. So let us go and check this out. Okay. Let's stop this. Very good. So let's see your responses. All right, here we go. Okay. Why does the student visit the professor? To discuss how to make a potentially dry topic more engaging. Yeah, you were right. This is exactly what he says, right? Well, professor, I need to listen and advice from you because I think my topic is a little bit boring. It's not that much exciting. It's not that much striking. Could you help me? Right. So good. Second question, what can be inferred about William III, Stephen of Blois, and Richard II? Many students are less familiar with them than with Henry VIII. And you know why this is a correct answer? Because the student says, right, we don't listen as much about kings as, and he says, right, William III, Stephen of Blois, and Richard II, as we listen about Henry. So what can you infer out of that? That many students, of course, if they listen, not too much information about William, Stephen, and Blois, and Richard, of course, that they do not know as much about these kings than Henry VIII. So that's what you can infer, of course, out of the information they give you for that particular sentence I'm mentioning, okay? Third question. Which of the following does the student believe is true of King Henry VIII? He is well known primarily for his colorful personality. Well, the professor, in this case, the student says so, right? But he's also a professor. He says, well, I think that he was a very interesting man, right? He was well known for having some sort of religious aspiration, becoming a guru. He was also very much famous for killing and executing his wife. He was married 2 times. He defeated the Pope, etc. Right? So, yeah, colorful personality here means like very much strifeful, right? Like weird and let's say eccentric. That is what the meaning of colorful in this particular sentence means, right? So yeah, in this case, the details of his life are often exaggerated. It's not true because he never said that he considered his stories to be exaggerated. What he said was that they were a little bit, as I say, creepy sometimes and eccentric, but not exaggerated in the sense that they were not as true as historians want to portray them, right? So we cannot say this is a correct answer. What about question 4? What does the student suggest he should do before giving the lecture? And he says, give a practice lecture to polish his storytelling skills. Yeah, he says this, right? Maybe I should try a rehearsal with somebody who is from and who is disposed to listen to me in order to check out if it goes well, right? So he says, yeah, I'm gonna make a rehearsal. So it's not discuss his lesson with another professor, but he says with somebody's able to listen to me. Not with other professor. He never says like, I want to go to talk to this other professor because I want to hear from him. No, he never says that, but I want to perform this lecture on somebody who is, disposed to listen to me. And the last one, when she says this.
What does the professor mean when she says this?
Oh, don't sweat it.
In this case, she wants the student to feel comfortable asking for guidance, right? And you know this because at this point, he was asking if he could get an advice out of her, right? So she said, no, don't worry, that's normal. She wants him to feel comfortable asking for guidance, right? Because, that's normal. It happened to me as well. I remember how stressful can it be when you are about to teach your first class. Don't sweat it, right? Like, feel comfortable asking about this particular matter and issue because I know what is it, right? So that's the correct answer. Well, very good. Anyways, dear students, we are going to finalize here then. You have a lot of material in the WhatsApp group to practice this. I sent that yesterday, if you remember. You have 2 different documents, PDFs, with that contain bunch of material to practice this section. So please make sure to use this in your free time. Okay. So please, before we go, I'm going to take your assistance and help me with your kind responses to our traditional poll. All right. Well, here we are. And if you have any commentary, anything, please. They are very much welcomed. Okay. Let's see. Well, so here is here present our dear Richard Fernando. No. What about Lenny Jimenez?
Yes, present, teacher.
Thank you very much, Lenny. What about Yvonne Cana? Okay. What about Maya Mariel?
Present, teacher.
Thank you very much, Maya. What about Flavia Montaño?
Here, mister.
Thank you very much, Flavia. What about Karen Ginelli?
Present, teacher.
Thank you very much, Karen. And we finally have Lucia Sulema.
Present, teacher.
Thank you very much, Lucia. Well, thank you very much, guys, for your kind responses. I'm going to be seeing you next time to finalize, to start, with a new section. Have a wonderful weekend and see you very much soon. Thank you.
Bye, teacher. See you
Bye,
Monday.
teacher.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much. See you guys.